Before we begin, thank you very much to Dragon Burst for joining the Patreon campaign. Thank you very much for the help. It all keeps the channel going. It keeps the daily content coming, and I cannot do this without you, so thank you very much for the help and the support. Also, you pitched in at the highest level. You've already put in your video request. We will get to it when it feels appropriate in the schedule, because it's actually a good idea. So, and that's goes out to anyone who pitches in, and then we got Discord access, etc., etc. There's a lot, but thank you very much for the help. So, we're going to be talking about evil bumblebees today. And this one's a little bit different, isn't it? Because we talk about evil Optimus Primes all the time, because there's a ton of variations on that one. You know, you've got your Shattered Glass, you got your Scourge, you've got your Nemesis Prime, who might be Optimus Prime corrupted by Unicron. It might be a living manifestation of the darkness in his spark. It might be an evil clone created by Megatron. There's a lot. There's a lot of variations on that concept. But when it comes to, you know, the kid appeal character, the arguably most popular character of the franchise, the evil takes on him have quite a few different versions, and there's a lot of different ways you can handle this one. So let's just look at the most prominent examples, the ones that come to my mind at least, of different evil iterations of the character of Bumblebee. And I guess we have to start in the most obvious place, which is the Shattered Glass universe. And we're going to start with the IDW because that one seemed to be a little bit more fleshed out, because it's an actual run of comic books rather than like prose stories told by the Collector Club. That said, this one is an interesting way of going about an evil Bumblebee. So it's very literal in the fact that it is taking a standard Bumblebee design and just giving it like the black and the yellow colors, and then Goldbug head. Boom, evil Bumblebee. What makes him different is just how the character is handled. So he does go through a rebuilding process, and the whole point of the rebuilding process is to be taken more seriously and to be seen as more of an imposing character. This Goldbug, has authority, and he wants people to know it, and he wants people to respect it. And that's kind of his whole thing, is to be acknowledged and to know, and for everyone to know this is the authority he has and to take him seriously. That does kind of get counterbalanced by the fact that he is still in this very small, petite kind of body. But that's kind of how it goes. He's supposed to be a reflection on Bumblebee, so that's the direction it goes in. The bigger flaw to the character is the fact that he is so against his original incarnation. He is so, like, upset by like what his original design, by what you're like being Bumblebee. He's offended when people think of him still as Bumblebee, and takes a great offense to that. It's a very angry take on Bumblebee. Very angry. And yeah, it's reflected pretty well in the story. He is very violent, as a lot of the Shattered Glass stuff tended to be in IDW. Yeah, he's a much more brutal take. Probably one of the more brutal ones of all the evil Bumblebees on this list. Because he's trying to overcompensate for the fact that he's not taken as seriously as he wants people to do. And that's kind of the downfall of the character. That's kind of the character flaw. Also, being small is a character flaw because he dies when he gets stepped on. Jetfire just kind of lands on him feet first and squashes him like you would a bug. But to that point, he does pose a threatening character. They did a decent enough job of making him seem like a very serious villain. At the very least, you took his attitude seriously. Now, that's IDW's take on Shattered Glass, and of course, that's not the original. If we go to the original, there is a very different vibe to this one, because it's going for something somewhat similar. It is a character that, again, this version of Goldbug is in a position of authority. He's one of the he's one of the Autobot Seekers, which, rather than being jets, is what they call their high-speed cars. Kind of makes sense if you're inverting literally everything. But rather than just acknowledgement for the authority that he has, he seeks to become the authority, having a problem with all authority figures above him. Granted, the other Goldbug did as well, but this one to a more extreme extent, to the point where he actually has made power grabs within his universe. So when the evil version of Optimus Prime gets disposed of, it's Rodimus, who wants to be Rodimus Prime, of course he does, that steps in. That Rodimus is very much the traitor character. He very much is the Starscream of that universe. But there's something weird, like Shattered Glass Autobots seem to be much more backstabby and power hungry than even Decepticons tend to be. Loyalty is not high up on any of their priority lists. So even though Goldbug has a position of authority in the Seekers, when Rodimus tries to take command, he becomes the authority in the Seekers, he still seeks power for himself. When that power vacuum opened up, it's a battle between him and Rodimus for who gets to actually take control. Rodimus is a little bit more clever, and Goldbug is forced to be in a position of, like, look, if you let me survive, I'll be your second in command. So he has to settle for that. But he still wants to be on top. He still wants to be the authority of the evil Autobots. And that's pretty much where he stays in story. But that, to me, reflects really well on the original Bumblebee, who sought approval and recognition by the authority amongst the Autobots, Optimus Prime. So rather than hero worshipping, he's trying to dispose of said hero and take over. It goes... for me, like, that's a better inversion. For me, that's like a really good inversion of like Bumblebee's normal traits, where he is still very evil, he's still very vicious, but at the same time, like Optimus is more like an obstacle to his goal rather than the goal itself. It's a good take. It's a really good take. And he remains on charge. In his story, he does remain in charge and on top for a long time, at least as far as the second command of Rodimus. Cowering a little bit here and there when Rodimus is not happy with his performance. His story ends when he gets arrested after the evil Optimus Prime gets reformatted by Unicron into a good version of Nova Prime. Fun how these things kind of work that way. Shatterglass is weird. Shatterglass is weird. But he just ends up being arrested, which is far tamer than being stomped to death. I also do want to make a point of just, like, I will admit, part of my preference on this one, I love the design. I love the design. I will admit, I think this is the prettiest one of the evil Bumblebees. Let's just put it that way. Now, there's more to say about that. But I want to save that toward the end. And we will just move on to another evil bug. In this case, this is Bugbite, who is the actual GoBot character in the weird way that they've kind of like integrated the GoBot universe into like the Legends storyline. And this is the alternate take where he is actually like, they used Transtech. So the whole thing that Transtech became is like the universal nexus of Transformers. So when the GoBot universe ends up integrated in, they end up in, that's where they end up. Bugbite makes his way out. He sneaks off. He manages to buy himself through illegal means, buy himself a brand new body, which happens to be the Bumblebee body, and sneak off into the universe proper, where he starts falling in line with certain Decepticons. His whole storyline basically revolves around him realizing that Megatron in the universe that he's currently in is responsible for his home universe's destruction. And he is far more tech savvy than a lot of these characters ended up being. The whole thing for him was figuring out how to reverse engineer a Cerebro shell to take over Decepticons in a mass field. and not so you don't have to bore something into their brain. He can just flip a switch and turn Decepticons toward his favor, which is a great way to try to stage a coup on Megatron. Don't know why you didn't use it on Megatron himself. That would have been a little bit more direct to the point. But it does lead to a lot of chaos. It does lead to chaos, does lead to battles, especially when everything gets interrupted. It ends up with Bugbite losing his head. The fun part is, Bugbite, like a lot of GoBots, keeps their actual cranial mass, like the organic brain part, because remember, they're cyborgs, not robots, in his torso, rather than inside his head. So he survives, he reunites with the other GoBots, and then promptly sneaks off again. Because Bugbite's gonna bug bite. He stands apart because he is just more tech savvy and a little bit more manipulative than the other Bumblebees. And because of that, he does have his own flair to him. It's flair enough that later iterations of Bugbite have actually come out. Like the one you're seeing on screen right now is actually the Flame Toy iteration of him. We've also seen iterations of Bugbite in not only Cyberverse, but we've also seen it in the Machinima series. No, not Machinima. Sorry. Netflix. They're both bad CGI Transformer cartoons. I get them crossed sometimes. But we're going to admit, both of them are kind of boiled down to just kind of generic thugs working for a larger villain. And in both cases, they're really just there to be grunt soldiers without having to spend extra budget to make another character model. Paint Bumblebee white, call it a day, good enough. So while, yeah, Bugbite has managed to sneak his way out of his original depiction and into the greater Transformer universe, he has not been applied very well. You know, it's weird when, like, the Legend story, like the backup stuff for the Bacons toy, that tends to have a better impact than, you know, a lot of the other depictions, even though some were in much more major things. Speaking of evil Bumblebees in major depictions, how about a movie one? Stinger's another one. Stinger is another video character I have a video request for, and I have to figure out how to actually use this character in a really nice way, or at least in a really entertaining way. So, Stinger is a KSI-built drone, which we saw many of them, but there's apparently just one that stands out as the Stinger, and it's the one that ultimately battles Bumblebee on top of Strafe, flying through the city, which admittedly is a super cool visual, right? So the whole idea behind Stinger is that he's made of like the transformium stuff. He like has the nanite transformation, which I still hate. But the whole idea behind him was that he's inspired by Bumblebee. It was KSI deciding we are going to build Bumblebee, but better. You know, like this is going to be our improved super version of Bumblebee. And like a lot of concepts and characters, especially amongst the villain ranks of the live action movies, this just was not fleshed out enough. For someone who was patently designed to be a superior version of Bumblebee, he really does absolutely nothing to show it other than look really cool. None of the drones are very effective in battle. They get torn up like every single drone and grunt soldier in all the live action movies. And then Stinger himself puts up less than a minute's worth of combat before succumbing to Bumblebee and Strafe eating his head. You know, so doesn't get to apply very much. Really, the only time he gets to show character is in the backup stuff, you know, the comic books, where he shows a far more maniacal approach and starts to play his like copycat of Bumblebee a lot more seriously and a lot more intently than the depiction in the movie. As you can see here, where not only is he battling in yellow paint in order to mimic Bumblebee, he's also welded Bumblebee's mask shut so that they look identical as well. It's about the only character he really gets to show. Just a little bit of trickery, and really not effective trickery, because he's definitely not. He didn't fool Optimus for very long when that happened. ultimately, Stinger is cool in concept. The idea of a mass-produced Bumblebee, a mass of drones, is kind of appropriate for a character named Bumblebee. Ultimately, though, we just didn't get to see enough of it for it to really shine. I love the idea. Don't get me wrong. I love the idea of, like, a human organization going, this is, okay, we need our own forces. Let's just copy their best soldier, and we will make him our own. That's a really cool idea. And then we'll make 100 of them. That's a good idea. It is not very well executed. But that leaves one. That leaves one we could still talk about. And again, he's not technically a Bumblebee, but he is meant to be a rival, and he is meant to be a different style of reflection, and that is Wasp. Now, I will give you this. He has a big advantage already because he had several episodes of a major animated series devoted to him. But that said, the story he tells is very different from the other ones. Originally, he's not evil. He's a jerk, but he's not evil. He wants to be an Autobot. He wants to be in the elite guard, and he almost gets that far. You know, if it hadn't been for the manipulations of Shockwave, he probably would have been one of, Sentinel Prime's main guys. But the story they told with him is very tragic, like he's a jerk, but he wasn't a bad guy originally. He was manipulated. He was, the victim of Shockwave's machinations, and to an extent, Bumblebee's as well, though that was a minor point. Bumblebee was trying to figure out who the traitor or spy within the ranks were, and Shockwave just pointed him in the wrong direction. But what drove him to villainy, his descent into villainy, is madness drawn on by years of incarceration, further manipulation by Shockwave, and this hatred toward Bumblebee for basically ruining his life. And the fact is, he's completely justified. Bumblebee did ruin his life wrongfully, and it's something that deeply affected Bumblebee when he found out about that. He wasn't supposed to be a villain. Circumstances just made it happen. And that's really upsetting. That's your tragic villain story. And it does get worse because he's still a very easy to manipulate character, shown by Black Arachnia and his eventual turn to Waspinator. I love the idea of turning a classic character from Beast Wars that we love and flipping it a little bit to where he can now be a counterpoint to Bumblebee. I mean, Waspinator, Bumblebee. That should have been obvious from the get-go. But no, it took the animated writing team to figure that one out for us. And thankfully they did, because it's a wonderful comparison and it's a wonderful juxtaposition. As rival characters, it works really, really well, to the point where I'm really upset we never got a season 4 to see if this went any further than it did, because Waspinator had plans, but they didn't come through, unfortunately. But that's going to be our lineup. Those are the ones we have to choose from. So, 5 evil Bumblebees on the table. Now, we're going to take Stinger out of the running immediately. Really cool in concept and design, but ultimately not effective. Just does not have enough time to be fleshed out. I'm also going to take Bugbite out, largely because, again, he doesn't have enough story to really compete with the others, but also because, well, technically he's not a Bumblebee. He's a Bumblebee look-alike. He's not designed specifically to be, a different take on Bumblebee. They just look identical, which happens a lot in Transformers. When it comes to the Shattered Glass, ultimately, and this is what I hate to bring up the toy design aspect of this, because that should not influence the character element. But the truth is, in this case, it does. As I mentioned, Shattered Glass IDW Goldbug, sorry, we're getting them mixed up now. Goldbug and IDW chose his new body, so the fact that a lot of them are not taking him seriously is due to his own fault for choosing such a diminutive and unimpressive form. It's where the difference in the character is being informed by the presence of the design, and that hotshot design from Cybertron is just so strong looking compared to your standard Bumblebee. If Bumblebee reaches a point of authority to become Goldbug in a Shattered Glass universe, I would expect him to look like that. So ultimately, there is a big problem with the depiction of IDW Goldbug in that the reason no one's taking him seriously is kind of his own fault. And that goes against the character they were writing, you know? And it just, I don't know, it's just kind of a major flaw to that depiction for me. That and the chip on his shoulder, yeah, being angry instead of being happy is a good counter to Bumblebee. But the idea of trying to seek the top authority position rather than seek approval from it, that feels more like a proper inversion of Bumblebee's traditional depiction. So I tend to prefer the original version of Shattered Glass B rather than the IDW. And then there's Wasp, who, yeah, it just tells a really great story, you know, and it's a very different one that Transformers typically gets to tell. So if there's a debate here of who the best evil Bumblebee is, it comes down to these two for me. Now, this is personal preference. You could like the more violent take on, you know, of Goldbug from IDW. You know, you could like how manipulative and clever Bugbite tries to be. That's all well and good. For me, it comes down to Wasp just telling such a better story and being a really interesting reflection of Bumblebee, how, like, this incident kind of went from them taking the same path and then showing the divergence to Goldbug from Shattered Glass 1, which just feels more like a very proper evil version of what Bumblebee's personality would be. I am not really prepared to decide between these two. If I'm going for who the better evil Bumblebee is, then it's Goldbug. If I'm going for who told the best story as an evil take on Bumblebee, I'm going with Wasp. And that's a personal preference thing that I'm not ready to decide on. So I will let you decide in the comments below. This is a preferential, could be either or depending on the day or my mood. But you are free to discuss in the comments below or to have a completely different answer than mine. But that's what I got for you today. Thank you everyone for watching. I will see you next time.